Let us praise and honor Senator Chris Dodd and his father, Senator Thomas Dodd, of blessed memory, for the legacy of seeking truth and justice under the rule of the law, so that the atrocities that we have witnessed and lived through will never be acceptable in any corner of the world. In the words of King Solomon, may this edifice always illuminate our steps. Let the clarion call for justice and truth fortify our resolve to strive for the eradication of darkness, ignorance, and superstition in our society.
When the Dodd Center was founded in 1995, it was with the ambition to place UConn at the forefront of human rights, scholarship, and activism, both here in the United States and around the world. Today, we are proud to say that ambition has been rewarded by research, teaching, and outreach that have made the Dodd Center synonymous with the cause of human rights.
When President Clinton spoke at this first dedication, he ended on a poignant reminder. He said, and I quote, "The road to tyranny, we must never forget, begins with the destruction of truth. The road to tyranny begins with the destruction of truth." In my view, that was the lesson at the heart of the Nuremberg trials.
In November of 1945, the chief prosecutor for the United States Supreme Court Justice, Robert Jackson, eloquently foretold why the trials at Nuremberg were so critical. His words, uttered 3/4 of a century ago, predicted the conduct of the trial and, importantly, the relevancy of Nuremberg in our 21st century world. My father revered Justice Jackson, almost a father and son sort of relationship, and he often quoted a sentence from Justice Jackson's opening remarks at the trial. Let me share them with you. That 4 great nations, he said, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance by voluntarily submitting their captive enemies to the judgment of the rule of law is one of the most significant
tributes that power has ever paid to reason.
I want to thank Senator Chris Dodd, his late father, Senator Thomas J. Dodd, and their whole family for championing human rights and for making it possible for our faculty and students to develop one of the best human rights programs in the country. I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to also thank Gary Gladstein and his family, whose vision and transformational commitment to the University of Connecticut established the Human Rights Institute, a world-renowned community of academics and activists united in the pursuit of human rights.
Chris Dodd has stood strong and fought hard for these values and ideals, and this place of learning and activism will motivate and inspire countless people to go around the world and around our own country and fight for those rights and liberties. It will be a place not only of great learning, but also of great activism. And I thank Chris Dodd and President Biden for making this day so historic.
Chris followed his dad into Congress and followed his dad into the U.S. Senate and followed his dad in terms of representing the very best ideals of this country, especially when it came to kids and family.
He set an example for so many of us, a senator who was willing to speak truth to power, a senator who understood the role that America could play around the world for good, for peace. Senator Dodd may have been following in the footsteps of his father, but there are so many all around this state and all around this nation who are engaged in some way in this fight for human rights, in this fight for democracy because of Chris Dodd.
And it was Senator Chris Dodd was right when he said, and I quote, "The lessons of Nuremberg must be continually learned." And like his father, Chris too has been prescient and brave on human rights and justice around the world. It is why the Dodd Center has such a broad reach, empowering and inspiring the next generation to be the change that we need in the world today. So today, through this center, we renew our commitment to the universal values of human rights. We rededicate ourselves to building a better and a more just democracy here and globally.
So as we rededicate the Dodd Center for Human Rights to honor the legacies of both father and son, let's also dedicate it to the future of generations, to the students here in the audience today who discover and defend human rights as the passion and purpose of our life. So let us be dedicated to expanding our shared understanding that we can never fully realize the freedom we wish for ourselves without also helping to ensure that liberty and justice for everyone. And let's dedicate it to the unending fight to bring our own nation, our own world, closer to a future in which every human being is free to pursue the highest dreams and unleash their full potential.
One sentence which captured the essence of Nuremberg, the rule of law. The confirmation of my father's conviction that the Nuremberg trials were of meaningful importance was expressed in a letter to my mother in the early summer of 1946, almost a year later after the trials began. The letter captures why Nuremberg resonates even today, in my view, with all who value the rule of law. And further, that letter explains the huge impact that Nuremberg had on my father and his deep commitment to human rights and the rule of law throughout his public life. Let me quote from that letter to my mother in June of 1946. "Someday," he wrote, "the Nuremberg trials will be recognized as a great landmark in the struggle of mankind for peace. I will never do anything as worthwhile again. Nothing will ever really be as important. Someday the children, I hope, will point to it and be proud and inspired by it. Perhaps they will be at the bar themselves, and perhaps they will invoke the precedents and call upon the law that we make here at Nuremberg. Today we gather on the campus of a great American university and at the entrance to its Center for Human Rights. May I say with thanks and confidence to those of you gathered here today who made this day possible, including, of course, my friend, the President of the United States. In response to my father's hope that he uttered 75 years ago, here at this center, at this university, in this our country, we will invoke the precedents and call upon the law that was made in Nuremberg 75 years ago."
We see in the passion of a young prosecutor a commitment to prioritizing the human impacts of policies. The commitment carried through in his son's career of public service by all the students of this institute have been inspired by the example. We need you. We need you badly. And as we look around the world today, we see human rights and democratic principles increasingly under assault. We feel the same charge of history upon our own shoulders to act. Nuremberg forced us to look closely at the evil of humankind and what we're capable of perpetrating. To see mass atrocities, crimes against humanity, do not happen by accident. They don't happen by accident. The result of choices made by individual human beings and world leaders. And sadly, when we look around the world today, we cannot say that the specter of atrocity is behind us. We must never forget just how fragile the principle of universal human rights still is, how easily bruised, often sacrificed in human battles for power and personal enrichment. In an age of increasing misinformation and disinformation, we must not grow complacent in our defense of the democratic values that have been the firm foundation for an era of peace and prosperity unprecedented in human history. Attacks on truth are still the harbinger of tyranny. Nothing about our democracy is assured, as I'm sure you're all becoming to realize today. Nothing about our freedom is guaranteed. We have to work for it. We're based on one guiding principle. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have never lived up to it. We've never, until very recently, walked away from it. The arc has always bent closer and closer to justice and inclusion. The moment we stop, the moment we rest, is the moment that our influence diminishes. And for you students that are here, undergraduates at this great institution, there's no reason why you will not be doing what I'm doing as President of the United States, standing here speaking to audiences from now. I mean that from the bottom of my heart.